Everyone during his lifetime will face situations where they have to come to terms with the inevitable. I'm not talking about the fact that we have mortal bodies, and because of that, one day this body will be gone. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the fact that, well, you can't turn back time. I'm not talking about that either. What I'm talking about is there are times you realize that some things will not be as you expect them to be. Let me give an example. You may want people to be transparent and open to you. That's a healthy expectation. If you have that term, it's a good term, it's a healthy term. You may be correct, but also wrong at the same time. Let me explain. When you're dealing with individuals that are healthy, that doesn't mean they have no issues haunting them, but when you're dealing with people who are willing to be realistic, then your terms concerning transparency and openness are good. When you are dealing with pathological liars or people that are on their way to reprobation, then having those terms, namely that someone is transparent and open, those terms are wrong in that context. Even though those terms in themselves are good, because the context is wrong, the terms become wrong in that context. Why? Because someone that's a pathological liar or a narcissist, they can become open and transparent to you, but they will only do it to take advantage of you. So your terms are wrong because it's not safe for you to even be involved with that individual. So you need to come to terms with the inevitable, namely that this individual is not safe to even be involved with. Therefore, your terms, even though in themselves those terms are healthy, they don't apply in that situation. Let me give another example. In 2011, there was this tsunami in Japan, and there was the security footage on which you saw a car driving in a normal speed. Then suddenly, the individual noticed something was going on. So the individual turned around and saw that there was a flood coming. What did the individual do? He raced away. He put his car in full speed and he got out of there. Now, what if a prosecutor would say to him, Mr. Takayuki or Mr. Yamaguchi, you have to pay a fine or you need to go 3 days in jail because you broke the law? What would the lawyer of Mr. Yamaguchi say? The lawyer would say, Your Honor, it's correct he broke the law. However, the law did not apply in this situation because there was a tsunami. Everyone was in danger. The laws are designed to preserve safety, but the whole situation was dangerous, so those laws could not apply. Yes, he broke the law by speeding on the road, but there were no other human beings there to be harmed. If he would have kept the law, he would have endangered himself and he would have died. And none of us would have been able to help him if he died. So the law did not apply. And what would happen? The judge would agree with the lawyer. Because indeed, the law did not apply in that situation. Because the context didn't fit it. Now, why did I give that example? It's because you have many people out there, including believers. That's why I mentioned this, because these videos are for believers. So I can say there are many believers out there who are just like the prosecutor. They have expectations that they claim are biblical. They have norms and values they were raised with, but that they've been conditioned in by their parents or by society, and they don't even check the norms and values or the expectations they're clinging on to. They don't even check them. But let's say they do check them, and they do realize that some of the things their parents taught them were wrong and they turned their own way. But even then, even if they're left with the good things they were taught by society or by their parents, too many believers don't check the context to see whether those good things apply. They don't. And that's why many believers are stuck in demonic patterns even though they're born again. And here's where the confusion comes in. Worldly people know that they are in a bad state. They just don't want to admit it. That's why they go to the pub. That's why they go to the bar. That's why they go to disco. That's why they go to those weird events. With weird events, I'm not talking about people that like to dress like cartoon characters. I'm not talking about that. Those are just habits. With weird events, I mean when the people come together to murmur and complain just to release anger. I'm talking about such events. They do such things because they're not in a good state or in a fallen state. Deep down inside, they know it. So when they hear that someone claims to follow God, that they have salvation, but they see that individual stuck in the same demonic patterns as they are, deep down inside, they're going to think, what? What is this? How can this individual claim to have the Savior, yet they're haunted by issues just like we are? Some of them have more issues than we, who are lost. How is this possible? Why claim to have salvation if you're not saved from those issues that harm you? This is where the confusion sets in, people. The confusion sets in when you have believers that remain stuck in demonic patterns. How can you, as a believer, glorify Christ while being stuck in demonic patterns? That's not going to work. Even worldly people with no knowledge of the Bible nor any knowledge of the spirit world can understand this. So, the reason why so many believers are stuck in demonic patterns is because they never come to terms with the inevitable. Christ told us we need to come to terms with the inevitable. Christ said that a slave is not above his master, nor a servant above his Lord. Christ said, if they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. Christ said, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. Christ said, in the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. So Christ gives you good news, but he also gives you the context why he's giving you that good news. Christ was talking about he giving us his peace. He told us he gives us his peace, not like the world gives peace, because the peace of the world is relief seeking, enabled by blood sacrifice. That's not what Christ is doing. Christ gives us his peace based on his sacrifice on our behalf. And Christ said, in the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. So Christ may explain to you why he's giving you his peace, because you will have tribulation in the world. So Christ is not selling you a fantasy to make you feel good. Christ wants you to come to terms with the inevitable. That means it is inevitable that you will face tribulation. You can't avoid it. However, what can happen is that you anticipate, overrule, and outdo the tribulation will come against you. All those possibilities you have. But one possibility that doesn't exist for you is that you will not face any tribulation. And Christ was speaking to believers. There are even unbelievers that go through tribulation. Everyone during this lifetime will go through tribulation one way or the other, some more than others. So it's inevitable anyway. But to believers is saying you will suffer tribulation. Why? Because you will face resistance by the world who remains in darkness. So a believer that has not come to terms with inevitable that Christ reports unto them is operating in darkness. Let me repeat that. A believer who has not come to terms with the inevitable that Christ himself reported unto them is someone in denial. And I would even say such a believer is an enabler of deception. Nobody can go against Christ's report because Christ's report is true. If Christ said in the world of tribulation, and someone else says, no, if you do God's will, this will be fine and easy, someone is lying here, and it's not Christ. Let me give another example. This will be more a personal example. You may have a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, or anyway, you may have a partner that doesn't want to face things, and they're now projecting their issues onto you. So now you have a spouse that's violent towards you. What happens now is that you are in a toxic situation that will only escalate and become more and more dangerous. And if there are children involved, if you have children with that partner, now the children are in danger also. And the future of those children are in danger. And with that, the community itself is in danger. So it's not just you. You are in a toxic situation that affects the community, and if you don't take constructive action, that toxic situation will become a menace to the whole community. Okay, so it's not just you. So you need to come to terms with the inevitable, means acknowledging that that situation is toxic and it will only escalate into a time bomb. And because you come to terms with the inevitable, you now take constructive actions to de-escalate the situation. Whether you force your spouse to acknowledge that he or she needs therapy or that they need help and the spouse complies, or that you take distance from your partner, or you keep your partner at a distance, or that you separate. I don't know what you have to do. You come to terms with the inevitable. And you realize it's not your fault that the situation is toxic. Because you acknowledged the toxicity and you took constructive actions on your part to dissolve the toxicity. So it's not your fault if the other persists in the negative. No, you did the right thing by not getting along with toxicity. Or let's say you grew up in a neighborhood and nobody in the neighborhood really likes you. Not because you are looking for a fight and all of that, but because you see through stuff. Now you're in your early 20s and you often have these intense headaches. And they hinder you in your studies and also at the work. You go to the doctor prescribes some painkillers to you, but the doctor tells you to look further because something's not right. And then someone tells you that it may be due to psychic violence, psychic attacks. And then you realize that it's true. That the reason why you have all those headaches is because people are murmuring, complaining about you. Now, those people who are murmuring, complaining about you, were meditating negatively about you. They're doing that in their houses. But it's still affecting you. That shows you that privacy is a hoax. Privacy does not exist. Because energy knows no boundaries. The whole idea of boundaries is nonsense to begin with. But you get what I'm saying. Someone can be in their bedroom with their lover, meditating negatively about you, and you can be in the office and it affects you. There is no such thing as privacy in the spirit world, so unlearn it. So understand that privacy is a man-made fantasy that we hold on to. It doesn't actually exist. Because the moment you believe in this hoax called privacy, you are enabling danger on yourself. Don't believe in it. Now, so you come to terms that you are under psychic attack. And you realize that the people that agreed negative about you, they do it because they didn't want to face themselves. And you can't make them face themselves and do the right thing. So you come to terms that this is a problem that you did not cause. So it's not your fault, but it is something that's haunting you. And because those human beings that have agreed negative against you are still alive and they are unrepentant, then you realize that this problem is something that you will have to manage. Not necessarily that you don't manage the problem, because it's not a problem, you don't have the problem. It's just that there is a problem out there haunting you. And the problem is likely not to disappear anytime soon, because the people that sponsor it are still alive and they won't stop. So you come to terms with, okay, this is not something I can just brush off. This is something I need to be constructive about. As long as those people are alive, they are going to emit violence towards me. So I need to be stable enough to overcome and overrule the violence that comes against me. I can't continue to complain about them being violent towards me, because they're not going to stop unless they're removed from the earth. And because I'm not authorized to remove them from the earth, I will have to find a way to deal with the harm they contribute to. You have come to terms with the inevitable. And if those people have children later on, and those children also begin to hate on you, now you have a generational curse against you and against your own offspring. Some of you have suffered so much in your youth, in your childhood or in your teenage years, not because of anything you did, but because of generational violence against your parents or grandparents. There were people that had issues against your parents, and your parents were on the psychic attack, and because of that, your parents had afflictions, and those afflictions affected you in a negative way, in a very harmful way. So you come to terms that you were affected by a generational conflict, and you realize that the only thing you can do is to be free from that generational conflict. Something else you can do that also implies that you realize it's not your fault and you can't fix it. You just need to be delivered from that conflict. And unfortunately, that may mean lowering contact with some relatives. You come to terms with the inevitable. How many believers come to terms with the inevitable? There are those that do, don't get me wrong. But too often I see believers stuck in demonic patterns and cycles. I see believers being afflicted with sickness, with poverty, financial curses, debt, and all of that. And I'm thinking, what? How can it be you walk in the power, yet those things keep having hold on you? How can it be? Where's your faith? Where's your salvation? Why doesn't your salvation work out on your behalf? It's because many believers have not come to terms with the inevitable. And when you don't come to terms with the inevitable will haunt you. The inevitable will have a hold on you. And demons can now use the inevitable to keep you away from doing God's will. Demons can now use the inevitable to destroy you. Reprobate human beings can use the inevitable to destroy you also. There are believers out there who perish in this life due to lack of knowledge. They lack understanding. And they lack the insight that they need to face the inevitable. Again, I'm not being fatalistic here, because we know that we'll be resurrected when Christ returns and that we will have immortal bodies. I'm not talking about physical death. I'm talking about the fact that during this lifetime, you will face violence, you will face tribulation, because you have those human beings around that refuse to comply with justice. That is something you need to come to terms with. Some folks will never, ever comply with justice. And because they don't comply with justice, there can't be any safety with them. If there is no justice, there is no safety. If there's no safety, no life is possible. That means there's only danger there. So just realize that there are many people who are just enabling danger on the earth. That's what they're doing. They refuse to comply with justice. And understand that you can't force them to comply with justice. Now, you can force them to stop some actions. You can force them to comply with external things, but internally, you can't change them. If internally they persist in the negative, they'll be enablers still. For example, if you have a child molester, you can use the threat of going to jail to hinder him from raping children. But if he, in his mind, keeps agreeing that he still has a right to rape children, he is still a walking time bomb. So you can restrain the man externally, but if he persists in the negative, he will still be a contributor to danger. So just understand that there are people who will never comply with justice. Never. They've made up their mind that they want to remain in darkness. They've settled for darkness, as I've mentioned in a previous video. So realize that because those people are around, you will face tribulation, because they're enabling danger, and the danger they enable, you will face it, you will encounter it. So stop being upset with those people for not complying with justice. I understand you. I'm not blaming you. I used to be quite upset with them also, but I've realized over time that that's not beneficial. Yes, you should be upset because they don't want to comply with justice, but it's far better for you to come to terms with the inevitable, that they simply will never comply with justice. They'll be spreading filth and danger throughout the earth until they physically die and they're later removed by Christ to the lake of fire. So until Christ returns, you will have to deal constructively with the filth they spread on the earth. That is the inevitable you need to face and come to terms with. To come to terms with it doesn't mean you approve it, nor that you condone it, nor that you support it. It just means that it is there. You need to deal with it in a wise and constructive way. If, for example, you have a boss at work that's mean and quite toxic, you come to terms with what he has become, but you don't approve it, you don't agree with it, neither do you enable it. You still enforce spiritual repercussions on that boss, and if it's needed for you to get another job, you do it. Just because you come to terms with something doesn't mean you agree with what you come to terms with. To come to terms with something simply means you acknowledge that it's there and that you need to deal with it in a constructive way. Believers, you need to come to terms with the inevitable, or the inevitable will have an inevitable harmful effect on you. Continue to agree with Christ.